June is Audiobook Month. Join Viviana, the Enchantress of Books, and the Audiobook Lovin Series as she celebrates the authors and narrators who bring your favorite stories to life. Not only will this month be packed with exciting guest podcasts full of all things books, but stick around after each episode for some special information about this year's giveaway and more.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 16 of the Audiobook Lovin Series. Today, I am chatting with the narrator, Lee Samuels. Welcome, Lee, to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
I'm excited. Have you done a podcast interview before? I'm trying to remember.
You know, I actually have not done a podcast interview before. This is my first one. I've done a couple of live chats, one with Samantha Brentmore recently, and did a solo one a few months prior. But yeah, this is my first podcast, so I'm putty in your hands.
I do love popping a cherry. Been doing a lot of that lately, but I love it. I do love that.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
No, you being a romance narrator, nothing at all. No. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been narrating, and how you got started?
Yeah, I've been narrating for about 10 years, and I got into audiobooks in a pretty sideways manner. It wasn't, I think, listening to other interviews and podcasts with my fellow narrators, it seems to be a pretty common story that, how they got into it was a little bit surprising. And in my case, it was a roommate of mine who was working at a very established audiobook production house in New York. Two of her friends were starting their own studio, Brickshop Audio. And at the time, they were just looking for male talent. And she, my roommate who I grew up with, I also had grown up with her, she'd always sort of encouraged me to maybe try to audition for something, but all of a sudden there was an opportunity. And she was very kind to take me into the professional studio that she worked in and work with me on, I think I did 3 auditions that day. And so that was my first time ever doing it. She submitted those auditions to her friends. I didn't get any of those books, but then now I was on their list. And so they would have me come in, and fairly quickly I was cast in my first book, which was not a romance, and this was not a Lee Samuels book. It was under a different name, and it was sort of kind of fits and starts, in the beginning, and I'd audition fairly regularly and get a few books here and there. There was, I heard Carly Robbins talking about this. I think she came into it. She must have come into audiobooks at the same time, because Audible / Amazon, they were just buying up the rights to tons and tons of books. And I think probably from that corporate side, they almost didn't care, who was doing it, who was recording it. They just needed to get all this stuff. They just wanted it. They just wanted the content. And I definitely benefited from that in the early days. I got to do a lot of nonfiction books and literary fiction, just a lot of different stuff. And then, more important for the Lee Samuels career, I started getting, some romance auditions, and the first book I did was very spicy. And I think that conversation that a lot of narrators go through at some point happened with me of, I guess I might need a romance pseudonym. So that's where Lee Samuels was born. And, I fairly quickly, I just became, it worked. I whatever it was with romance just worked well with my voice. And I don't know exactly how long after I'd started that first book it was, but I did a number of books with Sawyer Bennett. Those were great. I think that got my name out there quite a bit. A bunch of Brenda Rothert books. But it was sort of, I would probably do 8 to 12 books a year. And then that went up to more like 20 books a year a few years ago. And then, more recently, the past 2 years have easily been my best years as far as work. Like I'm definitely doing more books than I've ever done before. But yeah, that's how I got started. So I have my roommate to thank for it. And it was sort of like once I got my foot in the door, then it was just a question of getting more experience and getting more auditions out there and getting my name out there.
Are you doing this now full time?
It's not quite full time, but it's pretty close. That's another thing. I've always done different forms of work, and pretty for the most part, I've been a freelance kind of guy, which has worked well with audiobooks. And then but at some point, it was I think around 2016, 2017, I'd gotten a full-time job, and then I actually said I actually quit. I quit audiobooks, or I thought I did, because it just wasn't, it just like wasn't going to work with the schedule anymore. So I told the producers I worked with, I told Audible, I'm in Brick Shop, I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. And then I would still get requests from authors, or Audible would ask me if I was available for something. So I ended up still like keeping one toe in the audiobook world. So I kind of kept things alive. But then there's a reason why I like am a freelance guy, and I haven't had I've never been like a full-time job kind of person, because I just like cannot handle having a boss pretty much. So I ended up starting my own freelance side business doing like digital marketing work. And that was great, because once I did that, I was in total control of my schedule again. So then I went back and started picking up more books. And then the other big thing that happened for me was COVID and lockdown, because I didn't have a home studio until then. I mean, that forced me and a lot of narrators to figure that out. So once I had that, then all of a sudden, all these other producers could cast me. Whereas before, I was really tied to, a couple of studios in New York, whether or not I'd be able to like, go see them or get hooked up with another independent studio. So that's really helped a lot.
Yeah, it's amazing how you start off a career in one way and then it just shifts. And with audiobooks, it's just completely like trajectory wise, it's going up, but it's like whoosh, and
Yeah.
especially since COVID, and how it's kind of like made us listen more. And then also for you guys, the work has just shifted too, because like you were saying, what going for a lot of people using just the studios and renting that space out to like, ooh, I think I have an extra closet somewhere.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, my apartment in Brooklyn, forever, I was just like, well, it's not possible. We don't have the space. I don't have the space for it here. And, I looked at the closets, or I thought I looked at all my closets, and that it wasn't possible. But then something about lockdown, or when you actually need it, I think maybe changes your vision, because then I looked again, and there was this one closet which was in our bedroom that had like probably within like an inch or an inch and a half, had just enough width for a chair. And then I found this table that I cut it on one side so that it would fit in the closet. And I was just surrounded by, my clothes and my wife's clothing. That was my soundproofing. And, it was disgusting, but I made it work. And I was always so terrified of, after I would submit books, that producers would come back to me and be like, what are you doing?
Where are you?
Yeah, where are you? What's with all the? I can hear the sirens outside your house, and I mean, I was very vulnerable to the sounds of New York City, and like just my neighbors and whatever. It was kind of a nightmare. Yeah, like if you got to make it work, you make it work, despite having a heating pipe that would start gargling every like 2 minutes during the winter. So I would have to stop. It was crazy. It was really crazy. It was kind of torturous, but now I have I have my own booth that I have in my office. So now I'm like living the life as a narrator. It's much better. But yeah, I mean, what a crazy time. But definitely for audiobooks, I think a lot of people were just forced to figure it out or not. If they could figure it out, they did. And then I'm sure a lot of other people were pushed in the other direction, where maybe the work wasn't really possible to do anymore. Who knows? But it was definitely reassuring at the time, to know that this industry was not going to be negatively affected.
No, yeah, especially with more of us being at home. We're like, listen, unless you want us to go cuckoo for Cocoa Pops, we need something to do and listen. And y'all are
Yeah,
giving me audiobooks. And so yeah, it's
totally.
yeah. And the community has grown exponentially since then too, where there's people, I mean, for me, it was shocking when I heard someone say, I didn't know that reading could be fun. And I'm going, oh my God, my heart. Because as a reader, since as a toddler, I knew this. And I'm like, oh, so sad. Like, who hurt you? How did you not know that reading could be fun?
Yeah.
And then also too, when people were trying to be busy and stuff, I'm like, have you tried audiobooks? They're like, wait, I can read, but listen. I'm like, mm-hmm. I mean, I go, honestly, granted, if you're in the middle of cubicle world, like I used to be, the day job, there were moments where, you busted out laughing if you're listening to a rom-com and the line landed the right way. And you're like, there's no
Right.
one around me and I'm laughing on my own. People were going to get suspicious about something or think I'm cuckoo for Cocoa Pups or other things when you're in that moment of a romance where you get steamy scenes and you're supposed to be working on an Excel spreadsheet and you
Right.
just stop. And you're going, oh shit, I have to stop, pause, and then continue to work on that deadline because adulting.
Yeah,
But
totally.
yeah.
But you've noticed the community grow noticeably since COVID.
Oh, absolutely. Just realizing that this was in existence and or that it was an option for them just to keep themselves sane. And
Mhm.
also looking for that community. We used to be able to go out to Barnes and Nobles or bars and,
Right.
meet up with friends and go to the movies. And now we were relegated to PJs and nights at home and the same person for almost 2 years, with them.
That can be romantic.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, stop
Can.
breathing.
Can.
You're breathing too loudly. Go away. And so finding these communities where you can get online and say, oh my God, did you listen to this book? Or did
Right.
you find that about this narrator? I'm like, Lee who? Kidding. Kidding. I knew about you before that. But it was, I do find it, I love it. It's like when you're just kind of watching, like people watching, but online, and the listeners are going, oh my God, I just listened to my first fill in the blank narrator book.
Yep.
And they get so
Yep.
excited. And they're so like, oh, I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
It's awesome.
Yeah. And then you go like, oh, well, have you read this one?
Right.
And then that conversation goes. In the 10 years that you've been now doing this, how has your process changed from like prepping it, from being cast to actually finalizing that final file?
Yeah, I mean, it continues to change, and it's actually been I don't maybe it's more in my head lately than in reality as far as how much it's changed, but it's definitely like it feels different, and getting more books, dealing with higher volume has really put me in a position to reevaluate pretty much everything I'm doing, including certainly the prep. Early on, I think my prep wasn't very strong at times, or I wasn't sure exactly what to do, and I hadn't learned any tricks. But over like, I mean, one of the best tricks that another narrator shared with me was like to just, I mean, it was as basic as like if a character's name came up, to search for it to see are they going to be a major character or a minor character? Just so as you're starting to go through it, who you need to pay more attention to. Something else that I actually am not doing so much anymore, but I used to do before I started my prep, is I would just search voice. And for the most part, that pulls up key scenes of dialogue throughout the book. So again, you get like a kind of an early or, a quick read of like where the major plot points are. Also, you'll get a lot of the times you'll get actual notes on the voice of the characters, which of course is like the number one thing I'm looking for. But now it's more, I'd say I'm definitely more disciplined, and also found a way of being a bit more relaxed about it, where, I just take like every day, every work day at least, a nice chunk of a future book that I'm working on, and I'll just highlight, kind of scan through it. How quickly I can scan depends on the book and depends on how dense it is with stuff that I have to pay attention to. Like if I can see a plot is established, you can just kind of scan through at a certain point, because you are going to be also reading it again when you're actually recording it. But I'll just highlight, highlight new names, highlight any physical traits that are mentioned, which are also really important for developing the voice for those characters. And then, of course, any vocal notes and looking for accent and making sure you don't you don't miss any of that stuff, which is that is the nightmare. But then also something that I still feel like there's a blind spot in my brain on are like names like Ava, where you or like Eva. Is it Eva? Is it Ava? The other great fear is like, yeah, those names that there's a part of your brain while you're prepping and while you're narrating that is like, oh yeah, there's no other option for this. And then 3/4 of the way through, you're like, oh shit, wait a minute. Am I sure? Is this actually the way it's supposed to be pronounced? And then you're like afraid to you're afraid to email anybody and ask. So I've definitely gotten in situations in the past where I'm just sort of like stressed out for 2 weeks waiting for the retakes to come back. Like,
Oh,
oh God,
yeah. Oh,
today, is this all right? That becomes the biggest nightmare. But yeah, prep has become, I would say, like I said, like doing more books has forced me to be more disciplined and come up with new processes. And in a funny way, the prep it's become less stressful because I'm just handling it in a better way.
yeah. Are you finding now that because of audiobooks being more available and trending up, that you're provided with some of that pronunciation when it comes down to names or locations versus having
Every
to
book
go
is
hunting?
Yeah, like every book is different. And also it depends on, different producers have different sort of protocols with that. Some people you work with don't provide you with any notes, and then there are other producers that will go very, very detailed. I mean, it also depends on the authors because I think, basically what happens is the producers ask the authors in some cases for any notes, and then, some authors will send over a chapter by chapter synopsis of the entire thing with an incredible amount of detail, including pronunciations and including character descriptions. And then, like I said, other times you have nothing. So if I get those notes and I get the reference pronunciations, that's great. But I guess I don't expect any of it because everybody is really different. And I in my career starting out, like I'm used to not getting any notes.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a bonus. But if any producers are listening to this thing, I definitely appreciate it. It's
Like,
nice. It's definitely nice.
well,
Yeah.
there he's not getting anything from now on.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. Oh, he can
No,
handle it himself. Yeah.
yes, he
Right.
got it. He's got this. No, I think a lot of authors are now starting to be more involved in it and at least provide some of that information. Like he has a
Hmm.
Russian accent because you don't want to go in there, chapter
Yeah.
35, find out that as she says, and his sexy Russian accent, you're going, oh,
Right.
yeah, it's yeah,
That's why you search for the word accent
yeah,
because that will come up.
yeah,
Um,
right.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that explicit, you definitely want to mention it. But I don't know. I think it's just a very particular thing, author by author. And I try to think like, well, if I was an author, what would I be? I don't know. What kind of author would I be as far as providing more or less detail? I don't know. It just seems like everybody has their own comfort level. And a lot of times I have asked in the past, like, yeah, email when it has been more sort of DIY almost where there are no notes given. And some producers would ask and actually make it a rule to reach out to the author. Like they'd give you the email and like you have to reach out to the author yourself. So in that case, you're asking the author directly for anything. And more often than not, they said nothing. They would give me absolutely nothing back. So I'm like, okay, all right,
Okay.
nothing.
You can't get mad if it becomes Eva instead of Ava.
Yeah, right, exactly. But it's all good. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, it's just every book is different, every author is different, and regardless, like, once you're actually narrating, it's just you and the book. So,
Mhm.
yeah, as long as you don't have a heinously inaccurate accent, um,
Right.
it all sort of works itself out.
Yeah, I think we can be pretty forgiven when it comes down to some of those things because there are those options. And in my head, I may be saying Ava, you might be saying, Evie, kind of
Mhm.
thing. And but I think the issue becomes when you're changing those interchangeably through chapters, or
Oh, like
you and
like
your
if I
co-narrator?
oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
Or
that's
your
what
yeah.
right, right. That's what can happen. I don't think that's ever actually happened, although I I did read some reviews of a certain book once that or some where a listener did complain of that with, one of those kind of tricky names, and I was surprised to read that because I never heard anything. I was never like I never heard back from anyone saying, "Hey, this was messed up," or "This wasn't consistent." So, there's sort of like being a narrator is I guess it's as isolating as you wanna make it because it's up to you to reach out to people and to connect with people and to sort of network in a more social way to get more feedback, but that just sort of reminds me of, like, sometimes you don't get a lot of feedback,
No, you
and sometimes
don't.
you're really not sure what's going on after you turn in a book. So it's, yeah, I don't know.
But
It
also
it can
sometimes the readers think they know what you're talking about and they really don't. So I mean, there's
well,
been two
right.
instances where one is a reference to accents, and one it was saying, "Oh my God, their Irish accent is so fake, it's so bad." And they were talking about a narrator that was born and raised in Ireland.
Are
And
you kidding me?
no, I'm not. And then it gets better, but
Wow.
wait, there's
Wow.
more. Then they went for a British accent, and they were saying, "Oh, his British is so fake and it's fantastic, like horrible. Like really, like who said it that this could work?" And he is born and raised in London,
Oh
England.
my
It was a like a normal British
oh, that's
accent kind of a thing.
beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that. I love
yeah.
that.
So those are those moments where I'm like, don't feel so bad. Sometimes the readers don't know shit, and that's okay.
Totally, yeah,
It's
and
opinions.
that's what totally, and that's where I've gotten to a really good place, or knock on wood, as far as just my engagement with reviews, and yeah, they can go in so many different directions, and they can be so passionate in any in many different directions, and as a narrator, you're like, what am I supposed to take any of this as, like, substantive feedback or what? Like, it's really on you then to believe what you wanna believe almost, but just like, famous celebrities, in movies, it's a very common thing where, like, even the people who are, like, the top of the top in entertainment, they don't read reviews, like, they just and if those people are protecting themselves from that feedback, it's like, "Oh, wow, like, this is powerful stuff." So, yeah, I think there have been times where I'm, like, going into Audible reviews and just I mean, I think it is healthy to do it every once in a while to see what different stuff is out there, but I don't know, what I've been enjoying lately, getting closer to, like, what is my own standard? And I'm getting that more from listening to my fellow narrators and just spending more time doing that and picking up on, yeah, just little things that sound good to my ear, and they don't sound like me necessarily, but that's kind of the point, like, just training my ear and figuring out, like, what are the things that I can improve on and I can do better and that I think sound good, and what can I use my voice in a different way, or it's actually been really pretty fascinating couple of months for me where, you know, almost like there was almost like a Zach Morris timeout in Saved by the Bell where I
I
was
know what
like
you're talking about.
yeah, I would hope so, yeah. Um, where like I said, I've just been recording more than I've ever recorded the past 2 years, and on the one hand yeah, so I'm, like, having to kinda update the way I do everything, and then also just realize, like, "Oh, yeah, you actually this is actually real, like, you are actually just getting more books than you've ever gotten before," and, that means things maybe perspectives need to change, but it also means that my name is getting out my voice and my name both getting out there and, like, to some degree, at least, more than they have been before. So, yeah, I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, time out." Like, wh what am I doing? Like, am I cool with my prep? Am I cool with, like, how I correspond with, the people on the production team? Do I feel good about my performances and my voice? And is there, like, something else I can do? And I really opened up the box on everything, which was uncomfortable, very uncomfortable at the outset because I had previously, for much of my career, I operated under the assumption like, well, I'm getting cast in stuff pretty regularly. And, sort of assuming like, okay, well, things must be working pretty well if that's the case. And I've always, given everything I can into the books that I narrate. But yeah, this was like turning a new leaf for me, when I got into a zone where I was able to be way more self-critical. And part of that was also engaging with some negative reviews that I saw. Of course, the negative stuff always stands out more than the positive stuff. My favorite positive reviews, though, that I've been seeing lately are the ones where the person says that it seems like they felt like they were watching a movie. I'm like, oh, I think that's my favorite thing. But yeah, that kind of also kicked me in the ass a bit, like some of the negative reviews where I was like, because you can't control everything. Like some people just are not going to like the way that you sound or the sound of your voice or whatever it may be. And it is what it is. Like it's very subjective and you really can't worry about that at all. But yeah, it was really interesting to start thinking about like, well, okay, that's all good, but what can I control? Are there things here that I can control? And I found some kind of substantive things that I figured out I could improve on. But again, it's like going back to what my standard is and developing that and being like, what sounds good to me? So now it's in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm starting, not that I'm starting over, but things feel very different. Like I'm approaching everything in a very different way. And it's kind of thrilling.
I love that you're looking at it and asking yourself those questions. I think sometimes with freelancers, and I'm one of them, we tend to think that we're doing the best that we can and may not stop to look at what's been changing in the industry and how we can modify a little bit, or how can we do things differently, and just to be able to say, okay, we're going to do a self check and say, okay, we have this, 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 and this. It's important, and I think that a lot of times people sometimes will get comfortable in the love or the popularity or the volume of work, and they're like, oh, if I'm getting it, I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, but are you phoning it in?
Right.
Because I will tell you, I will be like, dude, I love you, but why are you phoning it in? I mean, I could tell and stuff like that. And that's another question too. And I love that you actually look at your reviews, because the conversation in the community is a lot of the authors are busting out with reviews are meant for the readers, not the authors. And I'm like, no. Hold on, back it up. And the reality is that the authors should, with a grain of salt, because again, reviews
Wait,
are like assholes. We all have them.
Are you saying, well, right, there you go. Are you saying listeners?
Yeah.
So the authors are saying, like, don't criticize my story, just criticize the performances?
No, what they're saying is that the reviews in general, like a review for a book, is meant for other readers and listeners, not the authors themselves. And I'm one that says, no, hold on, because it could be that there's a plot point that you're missing, or that or the there's the character development is lacking, or there's an inconsistency in XYZ, lack of growth. And a lot of people will focus on, there are those reviews that say there was just too much sex, and that will cause other people to buy the book because there's too much sex. Others would be like, it's too many curse words, and then they'll run to that one. And others will just focus on the performance and forget about story and plot and characters, which I think it's a detriment to the story. I personally review both. I first review the story and how that worked out, and then I review your performance and how that is done. And you can learn a little things here and there about it. And it's so the fact that you actually check it out and, again, taking it with a grain of salt, and also
I mean, you've got to be, I think you got to be, just like an author, like you've got to be really careful. But I also think it's just a process of approaching it. I don't know if there's a wrong way to approach it, but certainly for each person, there's a wrong way to approach it. Like everybody has a healthy version of whatever and a unhealthy version of it. So, and you can only really figure out what that is by kind of doing the unhealthy thing, at least to some degree. But yeah, there can be, I don't know, there was like an early review that always stuck out to me of, I don't know what book it was. And I think it was something I did a long time ago. They were like, they were sort of like, Lee Samuels is, they're like, they're basically saying like, he's not good. But they were like, "But sometimes he really is good." And because the reviewer had said that negative thing or had been they'd led with, "I really wasn't into this, but sometimes he's really good." That second part was I could really trust that second part, and it actually I don't know, it was one of those negative reviews. I mean, it was sort of, I guess, on both sides. It was positive and negative, but that was, like, really great feedback. I mean, it's like, oh, if somebody who wasn't really into it is still even saying anything positive, much less something like that, that you hit on something for that person. Yeah, this was a long time ago, but it gave me more confidence than I think a positive review in a way. So I don't know, but it's like reviews with everything. If you're on Home Depot, or whatever, like it doesn't matter what it is. Reviews are, it's like we love them and they're so meaningful, but you don't know any you don't know who's writing this stuff. So whether you're the narrator, the author, or a listener or a reader, like I don't know. We're all kind of trying to figure out what to believe.
Yeah, there's a lot of that conversation going on as far as like paid reviews, sponsorships, all that fun stuff too,
Mhm.
that are people
Mhm.
are wondering. But I mean, I think again, it's the fact that you're just at least checking it out.
Mhm.
As a reviewer, I do like that you guys check that stuff out, kind of get some insight and some information on there, and then just I always also preface it that those of us that are doing reviews, y'all don't have to be nasty, y'all don't have to be mean and assholes, really. You can be kind and still say he sucks, in a nice way, or what
Yeah,
about it,
yeah.
it's just
I mean, I
yeah.
think it just I mean, I have mixed feelings on that because I used to write reviews semi-professionally or professionally, or I would see myself more as a critic, and I totally understand the mentality of, like, you've got your bug up your ass about one thing or another, or an author or a narrator or a band, or I did a lot of, like, music stuff, music reviews, and I would be really I would be really totally nasty, and I would, like I mean, this isn't a knock on anyone, but in my case, I had shit to work out, like, in my personal life, and I was definitely taking it out on, you know,
Oh, yeah.
some band or something who's just, like, making their music, and I'm pointing myself as, like, "Well, I'm the one who's determining what's good and what's bad, so I have to be mean about it," or, but anyway, it's easy for me to see the fun in it too. Like, if some like, having a strong negative opinion is fun. Like, that can be a lot of fun to put that out there, so I get it, but, getting older, I think whether you're, like, intimately involved in this scenario on one side or the other, or you're not, like, I think part of getting well, for me, I'll just speak for myself. Like, part of getting older is also understanding, like, oh yeah, there are people behind all of this stuff. Like, no matter what it is, there are actual people behind it. So, and there is a chance that, they will they will read it and you might hurt their feelings, but maybe you want to hurt their feelings. I don't know. I
Well,
mean,
also, I think it's the intent behind it. You may have been one
yeah.
of those
Yeah.
like that said something like, "Oh, they're horrible. They, really, they should need to get a new musician." There's been some nasty, bad reviews, like they should die and never write again. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
it
I mean,
wasn't that bad, but okay.
well, but to me, that's someone kind of getting their, getting their rocks off in a certain
Yeah.
way,
Oh yeah,
and
they're looking
so
for that attention. Yeah.
yeah, and or, I don't know. So I kinda get it, and that's why there's, like, a degree to which I want fans or anti-fans or what whatever, like, I think part of the fun is having your own experience, and it's probably not as much fun to think about the human behind it, right? Because sort of the fun of fandom is not really going there. You're like a fan, you know? So whatever, like, hopefully I get it all, and I think everybody is sort of allowed to do it in their own way and just have fun with it. But yeah, it's a thing. It's a subject.
Absolutely. One of the things that we as listeners love is like accent work when you guys are creating these characters, and there is an
Uh-huh.
accent. And
Yep.
so what's your favorite accent to perform?
Well, I did entire book in a Russian accent. That was actually a lot of fun once I got warmed up with it. So I'm trying to think, like, is that my favorite though? I mean, an Australian accent is a lot of fun if you feel like you're in the pocket with it and you're you're actually like doing it well. I guess that goes for all accents. I do enjoy the Australian accent. I guess I'll have to go with the Russian because the British accent is not I don't think there's anything fun about it. That's sort of the well, now I'm thinking more. Like, okay, British, right. Southern, there's like the southern, the more like Georgia
Yeah.
rolling southern accent, and then there's the more flat western sort of, I think of it like as a Texas accent, which I actually really enjoy. I would okay. So for me, I would go between the western drawl, southern accent, and Russian.
Perfect.
But the funny thing about accents, in my experience, is like if you're like that book where I did the entire book as Alexei Markov, is that you get to a certain point where you're not even hearing it anymore, which hopefully doesn't mean you're not doing one. hopefully hopefully the accent is still happening, but I think in my experience, generally the accent is still happening.
Okay.
But it's kind of a funny thing. Like once you get, I mean, if you're doing hours and hours, and certainly in the case of that book, I didn't really have to go. I mean, I did have to switch back and forth, but there was a lot of narration that I was doing in that accent. So yeah, it just became totally normal.
Yeah, because we never think that we have an accent. So we always think that those that we're hearing have
No.
the accent. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and I've become more aware of that myself, just protecting my accent / non-accent in my normal voice. But yeah, accents are funny, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
is just like we only have so much control.
What about the hardest accent for you to perform?
The hardest accent. German. I remember I was like a German ticket agent, and it wasn't there. The tough thing with accents is a lot of the times is it's not half the book, or it's not a quarter of the book, because if it's a big chunk of it, you're gonna lock in, pretty quickly. But if it's just a couple lines of dialogue in the middle of something where the other characters, are not speaking with that accent, and it's something extreme like German, I don't know. I just remember this one instance where it was very challenging to come up with something, or just to put something down that sounded passable. And then those cases, and a lot of cases with accents, I just go back to, I think Paul Rubin maybe talked about this. Just that, well, okay, what I think about is, like, if I'm doing a southern accent of someone in Louisiana, you don't want to worry about actually doing like the perfect Louisiana southern accent, because you can do that, but then someone might be listening who lives there and actually like lives and breathes that accent, and the chances that you are going to do something that really matches what they know of an actual accent from that region are very low. So it's more about like not distracting the listener, and not doing something so strong that the people who do know will be so distracted by that they won't be able to enjoy the story. So I try to give myself, like, I'm never trying to like do the perfect accent, I would say. I'm trying to like give enough where you know what's going on, and you know which character is talking, and you know where they're from, but it doesn't have to be like pristine.
Yeah. Well, everybody's always like a sucker for like a Highlander Scottish accent. And I'm like,
Oh,
yeah, not if you were visiting and actually heard it. It's not that sexy. First, you got to really pay attention to trying to make sure that you understand it, because it's so thick. And so it's the whole concept of just enough to get me,
Yep.
to get us there.
I don't think I've ever done a Scottish accent, now that you mention it.
Put it on the
Surprising,
list.
right?
Yeah. I think those are a lot more historical, though. Sometimes they're starting to do more contemporary stuff like that for Scottish accents, but usually fall under historical.
Well, I'm doing some new dialect training soon, so
Cool.
maybe
Add it to the list.
maybe I'll add it to the list. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's an extra notch on the skills. It's always a good
That's
thing.
right.
Yep. What about your favorite type of character to voice? Because you get a lot of these different. They're overall usually the strong-headed alpha male of sorts, but because romance.
Yeah.
But
I
there's
mean,
still types.
I have not had a straight up alpha male in a minute. It seems like because when I was starting, they were all alphas, almost all alphas. So I got very used to super growly, like whatever, really just like living down there. And yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say the alphas are my favorite character, but although, I enjoy it's all good. Like I enjoy all of them. I've been getting sort of some grumpy widowers who have a good sarcastic sense of humor, and like that's been fun. I guess what I like about characters, and this is usually the case in the books, are when they do have some serious shit to work out. And I get to you get to play like the sort of charming front of the character, but then at some point shit goes down, and these guys, they just like completely lose it and break apart. And that goes in different directions in books, but I don't know if that necessarily answers your question as far as like the character, but that's like the character element that that I enjoy. And then I guess aside from that, like anything that has a good amount of comedy in it is a lot of fun for me, because that's as um, that all comes down to the timing, and that's not, comedy is a lot. I feel like a lot has to go right for that to come off in the best possible way, and sometimes it's one read out of 10 where you're able to get the right thing off that's going to translate to the listener's ear. It's just a challenge. It's a challenge. But then if you nail it, it's like there's nothing more fun. I just did or fairly recent Vacation Wars by Megan Quinn, and there were a couple of scenes in that book where I was losing it in the studio. Now, just because I'm laughing doesn't necessarily mean that the listener's laughing, right? But it's just a lot of fun to play that stuff, along with. I mean, when I start, I feel like I've done so many alpha, like growly kind of alpha characters that it's like riding a bike. But lately it hasn't been so much of that. Maybe there's more to come in the near future, but anyway.
Mhm. What about genres? With romance being an umbrella term with all these
Yes.
subgenres underneath it. I mean, one day you could be an
Yes.
alien, the next day you can be a firefighter, shifter, vampire, mobsters,
I've never
whatever.
done that. Yeah,
No?
I've never done that. No,
Yeah.
I feel like Lee Samuels has become very kind of straightforward in a lot of ways. Although for the Kristen Proby series, Shadows, that was a lot of fun where I was a ghost. I was playing two characters in that, but one was a ghost from New Orleans. So I was, trying to that was where I used my most extreme Louisiana drawl. But that was a lot of fun. In terms of genre, I mean, again, like I think it kind of goes back to the comedy. I just find that that's just a fun challenge for me right now as a narrator. I feel like that's the genre where when that comedy comes in, that's where I can grow and I can like get better and just get more experience with that. So I guess like the rom-commy stuff is fun. Oh, what is this? Let me make sure I get the name right. I did a recent book that was a suspense, Gunner, by Rebecca Sharp. So Reynolds Protective Book 3. I had a lot of fun with that. And that was, yeah, it was like romantic suspense and just a lot of, great bad guy and a lot of really good action and blood and guts. Um, so that was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, I don't know. The romance is amazing how many subgenres there are. And also like some dark stuff I did recently that I enjoyed. I really enjoyed a lot. Fractured Rhymes series. There's Golden Wings and Pretty Things. and Butterflies and Vicious Lies are both the first two in that series. So like I haven't done a lot of dark romance, but I actually really found myself enjoying the moodiness of it all.
Yeah, it's definitely a mood when it comes to dark romance. Whew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a genre that you have yet to narrate in that you'd like to?
Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I guess because the dark stuff, that was my first well, I have narrated in it. I don't know how dark that was on the dark spectrum. Let me think here. I mean, I guess something more paranormal stuff would be fun. I haven't really done a vampire book, so let's go with that.
Okay. Well, we're putting it
Vampires.
out there.
Yeah, vampires.
Perfect. Yeah, I
And then I
see
can
you as
use
a
the Russian
vampire.
accent. I was told with the Russian accent that it's just like it's Dracula, but more guttural.
Oh, okay.
That was what another narrator gave me.
No, okay. That's an interesting take on that, though. Yeah,
Mhm.
nowadays with the genres, there's paranormal and sometimes vampires fall into more of that fantasy thing. There's just so many different things. There's even like the type of shifters that are out there, polar bears,
Mhm.
squirrels, oh my, kind of
Oh,
thing. Yeah.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have not done any of that.
Yeah. So all right. Well,
So that
authors, you're hearing it. He is open to doing paranormal. That's one of
Yeah.
my favorite genres. So I'd be like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's my jam. Nothing like escaping into the
So you like the
phase.
shapeshifter stuff in particular?
Yeah, I
Or
think
just
it's
paranormal in general?
paranormal in general. Like there's been like Charlie Davison series, which is the Green Reaper concept. So ghosts and paranormal stuff, but also
Mhm.
technically, thriller mystery kind of thing because she's a PI. And then,
Oh, cool.
shifters and all sorts of things. If it's just possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah, you never know. I'm like, today I'm talking to you. Tomorrow you turns I find out that you're like a polar bear shifter or fill in the blank or you're a fae, and you're off to take me to somewhere else. It's just one of those
Uh-huh.
things where it's definitely an escapism, versus potentially
Yeah.
getting kidnapped by a mobster who's an asshole. And then
Right,
I'm like, oh,
right.
you're so hot. That's a lot more likely to happen in real
Yep.
life. And
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah, I prefer a little bit more of that paranormal, but that's like my
When have you seen when have you seen a polar bear in real life other than at the zoo?
I just at the zoo. I don't think I really would want to personally see a polar bear in real life that is not behind a barrier of some sorts because they run really fast and I don't.
I'm very curious about this plot now. I'm
Oh
very curious about
God.
the plot line.
Yeah. No. Well, I think also too we've grown as the industry has as well. It used to be that it was only vampires and then wolf shifters, right? That was
Uh-huh.
like werewolves.
Yep.
And as time went on, they were trying to figure that there was other things, and vampire lore changed too, as far as how they came about, the different types. Laura Adrian has a fantastic series that they're described and said to be vampires, but it turns out they're like an alien old race that came in, but they
Oh,
still drink blood, and so that lore of the vampire is different. And
wow.
yeah, it's a really good series. So
Is
it's
there
also
much, I'm kind of, I know some listeners will be like, "Why don't you know this already, Lee Samuels?" But is there like alien stuff? Is
oh my
there
god, yes.
a lot of alien stuff?
Oh my God, yes. Like you so funny enough, they make it seem like right now like it's a new thing. And I'm like, no, y'all have no, it's been around for a long time, but it would fall under sci-fi slash paranormal.
Uh-huh.
And now it's been more of a separate almost like a little sub genre, because even now like their tropes are tends to be more of importance than the genre. And so, but yeah, aliens are very popular, and there's aliens with multiple appendages. There's
Wow.
aliens that provide that gift the new mates of sorts, or the person that they're going to be with, a kitten.
Mhm.
So it's just a bunch of different variables. They've gotten very creative and very out there sometimes. But hey,
Did you see there was like a TikTok video by some I think she was in her 20s, like young lady in Iowa. And I think this was when, like when that Pentagon report was coming out and everybody was very excited about what it was going to
things
say.
in the sky, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I was one of them. I was like showing my kids like all the UFO videos that have come out. And anyway, this TikTok video came out and she was like, okay, so weird. I went out and I met this guy. I met this guy in Dubuque, or whatever the city was. I'm not sure what city it was, but let's say it's Dubuque. Like I went out on I was on on whatever, on the dating app. You can tell I've been married for a while. And I go meet him. We have sex. It's over. He asked me to drop him off in the middle of this field, in the middle of the farm field. I'm like, oh, that's super weird, but whatever. Drop him off there. And then next day I see UFO sightings in the same town, right where I was leaving him off. So she was making the case that she'd had sex with an alien.
Oh boy, if it makes her feel better.
Yeah.
Or makes it more adventurous, right? I'm like, ooh, potential opportunities.
She was really selling it.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that again, that's part of the escapism, the possibilities, and then also trying to, in a lot of these stories, especially with paranormal, it's always how did you not know, right? Or how have you been hiding it for this time? So you will look at your spouse maybe and go, are you a shifter and just haven't told me? What did I was like, what haven't you shared with me?
And then he says no, and you say, no. But can I believe you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I always tell my husband, I'm like, are you like secretly like a millionaire and a billionaire kind of a thing, and are just waiting to make sure that I truly love you for you? And he's like, no, honey, you married a teacher. I'm like, right. But are you sure?
But you might be the heir to a billionaire oil fortune, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. No, it's okay. But again, authors, you heard it here. Lee is open to doing paranormal, so I'm sure there's you'll be getting stuff now.
We'll see. Yeah. All right, it's out there.
Absolutely. So one of the things I love to do with my guests is play the game of 2 truths and a lie, where you'll tell us 3 things about yourself, and we have to figure out which one's a lie. Also figure out how good of a liar you are. Or detail oriented. We'll see. So if you have your 3 things to tell us.
I do. I'm prepared. Perfect. I did my homework.
Yay.
Good student.
Yep.
Okay. So you're ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. Number 1, I live in New York City. Number 2, I've been published by the New York Times. Number 3, I've been an international keynote speaker.
My goodness. Okay, you did good.
Awesome. Good.
You did good. Yeah. Here's the thing. There's something I've learned about this game. Is a lot of the stuff is in the details, and what you may have or may not have shared. For an example, the whole being published by New York Times. May have happened.
Well, I may have
your
held
real
back.
Name.
I may have held back on some details.
Yep.
Previous in our conversation because I did my homework.
Exactly.
Tip my hand.
Yeah. And so, international keynote speaker, published by New York Times, or live in New York. Is the lie the international keynote speaker?
That is true.
Okay. So, see? Published by New York Times is a lie then?
Nope.
That's true?
That's true.
Okay. So the live in New York
I no longer live in New York.
Yep.
Yeah, we moved about 2 years ago.
See. Should have gone.
So I win.
Yes, you do. And also with the
took you 3 guesses. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
Sorry, I shouldn't gloat.
It's okay. I like it. You're fine. But here's the thing: not only do you win, but it doesn't happen often. So congrats!
Oh wow, cool! Yeah. All right, I'll take it
for sure. No, it's definitely something that on the details and stuff like that, and published by New York Times. I'm assuming that's obviously not in your
not under Lee Samuel's. Yeah, and same with the keynote speaker, lecturing work. So, I mean, the pseudonym, having a pseudonym it's weird, and especially as I'm, this is my first podcast, and as we talked about now, big news, I'm finally on Instagram.
Yeah.
Wow.
So proud of you.
I got it together. So, that tells you something, I guess, about, what how public I am about stuff, or just like how much I've engaged, let's say, with the realities of the pseudonym, and like interacting with people as Lee Samuels. And it's odd, it's just kind of odd. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, screw it. Like, I'll put my, who cares? Like, I'll put my photo out there and just tell people what my legal name is, and, the name I've written under or spoken under, doing these other things. I published a book. That's what a lot of like international speaking was from. And it was a nonfiction book, about, it was actually published around the same time I started narrating. So that was part of the reason why I, did think to have a pseudonym, because my name was out there, doing other stuff. And I didn't know, I didn't know what was happening, like where writing would go or where other things would go. But yeah, it's just kind of, I've gleaned also from listening to interviews with other narrators that everybody is, everybody sort of feels the same way. It seems that it's like, yeah, I don't, like, kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. And I can see other narrators coming out with new pseudonyms, and like people having multiple pseudonyms. And I've thought about that a little bit. I'm like, oh, am I gonna make this more complicated? I don't know. It's just kind of I guess there's no answer for any of it. It's just narrator by narrator, what kind of, how you want to brand yourself, and like how you want to roll with it. But it's odd.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
all this stuff was under my other name. Yeah.
okay. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking it no longer lives in New York, but it's one of those where I'm
Mhm.
going, okay, we'll see. Also, it's a good way to get to know you better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I miss New York a lot. And that was, if I hadn't lived in New York, there's no way I would be a narrator, And yeah, so I'm actually, when I was talking about, I held back on the accent thing because I grew up in the upper Midwest. I live in Wisconsin, like north of Milwaukee, and I grew up in the area. And coming from New York, back here, I am more aware of the Midwestern twang. And I never really had an accent growing up, but now that I'm around it and given my line of work,
You pick it up faster.
I hope not. I'm afraid of picking it. I'm afraid of picking anything up because I feel like I have to. I'm pretty. I think I'm. Everybody has their stuff, in the way they talk, but I feel like I'm pretty neutral. And I want to keep it that way. So I've thought about like not. I'm more conscientious of talking, sort of keeping my voice in the front of my mouth and not in the back, and just stuff like that, where I've identified like I'm kind of in a danger zone here where I'm interacting with some very strong accents at
Yeah.
times, and I got to watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to pick up accents pretty quickly when I'm hanging out outside. When I go to
Mhm.
Savannah, Georgia, after a couple of days, I start having a bit
Oh,
of a southern accent there, Savannah.
it's
And
beautiful.
yeah, it's great. I love it there. Love the ghosts. See, paranormal. Anyways,
There you
and
go.
but then when I go visit, Texas, because I have in-laws there, it's they're a little bit of that more southern twang, and I'm
Mhm.
like, geez Louise, and I'm not making fun. I'm not. It just sticks. And going to more than 20 years ago at this point, went to Boston, and I still have to purposely go, I'm going to go to the car, because otherwise it goes, I'm going to go to the car. That's the only of all the words, car is
Yep.
the only one
Yep.
that's kind of stuck with a Boston accent. And so I'm like
Uh-huh.
constantly going like, I'm going to go to the car.
Wait, when you're there, you start saying that
No, just here. It's just that word just stuck with me for some
from
reason.
because you used to live there.
No, I visited.
You just visited
Yeah.
and you started saying that?
Yeah, I was there for like a week, and in the middle of the city, and
Wow.
yeah, and so it's just one of those, you hear it, and I have a keen ear. I think that that's part of it.
Wow.
And so even like I say, even when I visit Savannah, Georgia, if I'm there, I'm like, yeah, so I'm like, it's not that I'm not mimicking, it's just one of those, it just kind of hits. And then when I come back, there's a little bit of that southern, little bit
Yeah,
of that
yeah.
twang, or when I'm visiting and hanging out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
Yes, because I don't ever want to make it seem like I'm mimicking, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to
Yeah.
hear it and be like, oh, all right, I'm some Savannah, Georgia. All right, kind of go from there.
So you're exactly the person I was talking about before, where like you spend time in Savannah, Georgia, and you spend time in Texas. So like a Southern accent is very
Mm-hmm.
dangerous for your ears.
It can be, but at the same time, it's one of those where it is what
Like
it is.
what are your expectations as a listener for
You're
like a
going to
Southern
give me
accent?
just enough that I can tell that it's a Southern
There you
accent.
go. Yeah, which is what I was saying before as
Mm-hmm.
far as that approach. And
Yeah.
then again, like if you're doing a whole book, your ear, even though you're listening to yourself the whole time,
Mm-hmm.
you get accustomed to the accent, and at a certain point you're like, am I saying it? Am I doing it? Am I not doing it? Am I doing it too much?
I
Like
was
I don't
like,
know
oh.
if I'm I don't know if I'm doing it too much or not at all
Well, yeah.
simultaneously. Like that's how kind of crazy it can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things when people talk about how in one book this character had this particular tone and cadence and voice sounding, and then the next one they don't because it's now a swapping of POVs. And I always tell them, I go, how you sound to me when you're talking is different than how you sound to yourself when you're talking. So I'm going to hear you differently than you hear yourself.
Absolutely.
And so same thing with that. And so that kind of has helped a couple of the listeners go, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's just think of it that way. We all sound different.
Right.
I don't, so I don't think I have an accent. I've been told that, yeah, there's something in your voice that there is an accent. They just can't pinpoint. I'm like, it's because I'm from Florida or Miami, Florida. So I'm bilingual at the same time. And so there's one of those things where there is certain words you're going to pick. Oh, there's something there, but I like keeping things mysterious. So I keep you guessing and kind of go from there. So it's all, relative. I just want enough that I can tell that it's a Southern
Yeah.
accent or a British
Right.
accent or so on
Right.
and so forth. So yeah, I'm all good for, I have standards and they can be pretty high, but I'm also realistic. And,
Right.
so that goes from that perspective, but yeah. Were you working with words all the time, both writing it now that we know that and
Yeah.
recording? What's your favorite word? This is separate from your favorite curse word because that's part 2 of this question.
Oh my God, my favorite word.
Yeah,
That's really hard.
I try.
My favorite word? Oh man. Resplendent. I like that word. It's not really an audiobook word or a narration word, but it's kind of I feel like it's always funny. It's almost always funny to use the word resplendent.
How would you use that? I'm not familiar with that word.
Maybe it's just more also tied to my sense of humor and some sense of humor with friends, but there's a film called Gator, which is starring Burt Reynolds, and it's a Florida movie, so you may want to check it out or not, but it was like a 70s movie, I guess, when he was a superstar, and it's a very silly movie, and he wears a lot of denim in it, so I used it as he was resplendent in denim. So he's like kind of fabulous and elevated and beautiful and like it's almost like gaudy. I don't know. It's like all of those things, but I just think
You think
it's
of
not a word that's very common.
Yeah, no.
People don't say resplendent very much.
They don't.
But to use it with like a little sarcastic edge, I enjoy. It's like
I can tell that about
usually
you.
I also like using it with to call something resplendent that is not actually resplendent that's where the humor in it is. But resplendent in denim.
Okay.
Again, everybody, Gator, starring Burt Reynolds.
Perfect.
Check it out. You'll see what I mean.
Okay.
It's true.
Will do. Now he's giving us homework.
It's all about the swamps, the Florida swamps.
Yeah. No, thank you.
And it's not a good movie.
Couple of things there. You said gators and the title and the timeline and denim. So yeah. But
yeah, to each their own.
Yes. No,
we may have been watching the entire movie sarcastically. So
yeah, that could be fun too with the right group of friends. So I totally
Oh,
understand.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then
I wish I could still do that. That's like not possible for me anymore.
Mm.
But
What
I'm a
what
family
about
man.
what about your favorite curse word?
I mean, fuck is like, how can there be a better curse word than that? It's like, let me check. Are there any? I mean, asshole is not anywhere. I mean, it's just not.
Mhm.
It's I just I don't know. How can you beat it?
Mm.
You
Hmm.
do you have a you don't agree?
No, I think it's I can use that word as a noun, adjective, pronoun, all those fun
Mhm.
stuff, and it's
Yeah.
very loving in a very condescending way.
I mean, I
And
do
so
like yeah, I do like shit too. I was sort of like that was my mom's favorite. That was the one curse word that she would
he would say,
use and that would slip out. So I have an affinity for shit. But then as far as like compound,
hmm
like fuckwad or shithead, I'm just
motherfucker.
trying to yeah, motherfucker's great, but I still feel like fuck is like you said, I mean, you can use it for so many things and in so many ways, and it's such a pleasure to say, like always.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I think I gotta. It's boring, but
No.
it's boring for a reason. I mean, it is. It's sitting on the throne of curse words, and it's there for a reason. I'm not challenging the crown.
No, that's a smart move.
Have any narrators said anything like surprising? Any
Um, there's been some that have like if they're bilingual or multilingual, they may use some of their favorite curse words in a different language, which I think sometimes can be significantly more colorful and descriptive. Others tend to go with fuck as their go-to, and then maybe some different type of slang like wanker is bloody hell are my
I
two
don't
other
like
ones,
yeah,
kind of thing.
I don't like either of those.
Yeah. Good to know. I'll make a list.
I bet were they from the UK? The
Yeah.
people
No,
yeah.
they were from the UK. I sometimes, because I've listened to some
Oh, okay.
historical romans, I will go there. But like, I'm really pissed about towards, especially towards someone when I'm like call them a fucking cunt. That's like, ooh, we need to
Sure.
move her away from this person, kind of a thing. Like,
I've never
yeah.
used that word
No,
for anybody.
I
Yeah.
haven't. There's
You'd have to be pretty mad, yeah.
Yeah, I will say it, and there's at least a few people that deserve it, but it's one of those where I'm like, oh, they're such a fucking cunt, and they're like, oh yeah, yeah. But it's reserved for that type of level, kind of a thing. Otherwise, everybody's like, you fucking asshole.
Well, so for you, then maybe that's the number one because it's like reserved for a very special case.
But because of that, though, I won't use it as a favorite curse word. For me,
Mhm.
the concept of a favorite curse word is when I
'Cause it's
use it, you
not
can
that
use it.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. You can use
hmm
it a lot. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense, that makes sense.
So
Okay.
fuck
Well,
is
I think we've
mine.
broken this down. I think we've covered
Yeah.
this from every single angle.
Yeah. So before we go, can you tell us what you're currently working on and what's coming up next that you can share?
Yeah, right now I'm working on the new book by Jane Diamond, Wicked Angel. So that's what I'm working on right now. And then what is well, the big thing is Not So Lucky by Trelina Pucci, which is I'm recording next month, and that's getting quite a bit of chatter that I'm aware of on Instagram. And then I'm also doing very pursuing a book by S.L. Scott, Forgot to Say Goodbye. And I'll just tell you the other one before my vacation, The Wrong Mr. Right by Stephanie Archer. That's coming up. And then like I said, I just got cast in a short, I guess, novella by Kristen Proby. And I'm doing another book for her, I think in November, but that's been good. I did a Chapel Bend that just came out by Kristen Proby, and that was a lot of fun. And it was nice because I did quite a few books for her in the past, like maybe I am so bad with time at this point, but like maybe 3 years ago, and then previous to that, I did a run with her, and then there was just a big gap where I haven't done anything for Kristen, so it's really fun to it's kind of more fun when there is a gap like that, and then because there's like this historical kind of familiarity with the author, and so it's nice to be doing stuff with her again. But yeah, Not So Lucky, that's with Samantha Brentmore and Jacob Morgan and Teddy Hamilton are also on that. So that's gonna be a lot of fun, and that's a duet, I believe. Yeah, and then I have a bunch of other books that will be coming out. I just did a book called Unexpected by Lindsay Cord, that may be an author that have you ever heard of her?
No, Lexi Cord. Let me see.
Lindsay Cord.
Oh,
Lindsay Cord.
Lindsay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think she may be a fairly new author, but that was definitely, more of a rom-com. And it was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And I don't know. Yeah, Black Ties and White Lies, that's coming out in June. So
Yeah.
hopefully
That's a
people
lot of
enjoy
stuff
that.
to look forward to for you.
I have a lot of there's a lot of stuff coming out. There's a lot of stuff that came out, and I'm just like, my vacation is coming in late June. I'll get a little break and then start all over again next year.
Nice.
Oh, also, I'll mention at some point in the future, there's going to be another Elle Kennedy book in the series. The previous books in the series were Rogue and Misfit, which was a big multicast. But I'm excited because my character is, I think, going to be the most prominent male POV in the next one, and he's sort of a kind of a dark and sarcastic, character amongst these friends, and I'm excited to play him again.
Nice.
So but I don't even have a recording date, so I don't know when that's going to happen, but that will be coming in the future.
Well, you can keep us posted via your social media.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be all hey,
you'll be all caught up.
Now that I'm caught up, posting all of my old titles.
Yep. That'd be easier.
All sorts of things are possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee, for being part of this year's Audiobook Lovin Series. It's been so much fun getting to know you.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Awesome. Everyone, thanks for hanging out with us today, and we hope you've enjoyed this chat as well as the series. I will be including his social media information in the Audiobook Lovin page over at Viviana Enchantress of Books, so we'll make sure you're following him. And until the next time, happy listenings.
A special thank you to authors DJ Krimmer, Tana Stone, Landon Beach, PJ Fiala, and all of our sponsors of the Audiobook Lovin 2023 series.
Visit today's episode post to listen to sound clips of some of the books we discussed and enter the month-long giveaway. If you enjoyed the Audiobook Lovin podcast series and you want more, join the Audiobook Lovin podcast Patreon for early access to podcasts, exclusive content like the Would You Rather game and dinner party guests, and additional incentives such as bloopers, graphics, and much more. Support the podcast by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/audiobooklovin. Thank you for joining Viviana and her guests for this podcast, and we hope you tune in again as we continue to celebrate Audiobook Month. The Audiobook Lovin Series is hosted by Viviana, the Enchantress of Books. Please make sure to visit the main page linked within the post to learn more about the entire Audiobook Lovin Series and the enchanting author and narrator guests who have joined us over the years. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a review wherever you listened, and please follow us on social media platforms and subscribe to the Viviana, the Enchantress of Books newsletter. Until next time, happy listening. Audiobook Lovin hopes you have enjoyed this program.